Hey everyone! Welcome back to Easy English with Erica. I'm so excited you're here today because we're diving into something that can absolutely transform your English learning journey. We're talking about reading strategies that actually work. Now, let me ask you something. How many of you have tried reading English books or articles but felt completely overwhelmed? Maybe you got stuck on every unknown word, or you read an entire paragraph and realized you had no idea what it was about. Trust me, I've been there. When I was learning Spanish, I remember picking up a novel, feeling so motivated, and then, 2 pages in, I wanted to give up. But here's the thing, and this is so important, reading doesn't have to be torture. In fact, reading can become your secret weapon for improving English faster than you ever imagined. Today, I'm sharing 10 proven strategies that will completely change how you approach English texts. These aren't boring academic theories. These are real, practical techniques that I use with my students every day, and the results are incredible. You're going to learn how to understand more, remember more, and actually enjoy reading in English. Are you ready to transform your reading experience? Let's jump right in. Music. Tip 1. Choose the right level materials. Let's start with tip number 1, and this is absolutely crucial. Choose the right level materials. I can't stress this enough. This is where most English learners go wrong, and it's completely understandable. Here's what usually happens. You're feeling motivated, you want to challenge yourself, so you pick up a complex novel or a difficult news article. Sound familiar? I did the exact same thing when I was learning French. I thought, I'll just push through the difficulty and learn faster. But what actually happened? I got frustrated, confused, and eventually stopped reading altogether. So how do you know what's the right level for you? Here's my simple rule. You should understand about 80 to 90% of what you're reading without using a dictionary. If you're stopping to look up words every few sentences, the material is too difficult. If you understand absolutely everything, it's probably too easy. But Erica, you might be thinking, how can I improve if I'm not challenging myself? Great question. Here's the secret. When you read at the right level, you naturally encounter new vocabulary and context. Your brain can focus on comprehension rather than just survival, and you build reading stamina and confidence. Think about it like going to the gym. You don't start by lifting the heaviest weights, right? You start with a weight that challenges you but doesn't injure you. Reading is exactly the same. Here's how to test if something is right for you. Read the first paragraph. Can you understand the main idea even if you don't know every single word? If yes, perfect. If no, find something a bit easier. There's no shame in this. It's smart strategy. Some great sources for appropriate level materials. Graded readers designed for English learners. Young adult novels. They're often perfectly challenging but not overwhelming. News websites with simple English versions. And blogs written for general audiences. Remember, the goal isn't to impress anyone with how difficult your reading material is. The goal is to improve your English, and that happens best when you're reading regularly and enjoying it. Tip 2. Read for gist versus reading for detail. Now let's talk about tip number 2. Understanding the difference between reading for gist and reading for detail. This is a game changer that most people never learn. Let me explain what I mean. Reading for gist means reading to get the general idea, the main point, the overall message. Reading for detail means reading to understand specific information, exact facts, precise meanings. Both are important, but knowing when to use each strategy will save you so much time and frustration. Here's a personal example. When I read the news in the morning, I usually start by reading for gist. I quickly scan the headlines and first paragraphs to understand what's happening in the world. Then, if something interests me, I read that article for detail. This approach helps me cover more information in less time. Most English learners make this mistake. They try to read everything for detail, all the time. They think they need to understand every single word and sentence perfectly. But this is exhausting. Even native speakers don't read everything with the same level of attention. So when should you read for gist? When you're browsing social media, scanning news headlines, looking through emails, reading the back of a book to see if you want to buy it, or getting a general overview of a topic. The goal is to quickly understand, what is this about? When should you read for detail? When you're studying for an exam, following cooking instructions, reading work documents that require action, enjoying a novel you love, or learning about a topic that really interests you. Here's how to practice reading for gist. Set a timer for 2 minutes, read as much as you can of an article, then try to summarize the main point in 1 or 2 sentences. Don't worry about the details you missed. Focus on the big picture. This strategy alone will make you feel like a much more confident reader. You'll realize you can understand a lot more than you thought, even when you don't know every word. Tip 3. Use pictures and context for comprehension. Let's move on to tip number 3. Use pictures and context for comprehension. This is such a powerful strategy, but it's often overlooked. Think about this. When you were a child learning your first language, did you learn from boring textbooks? Of course not. You learned from picture books, from observing the world around you, from connecting words to images and experiences. So why should learning English be any different? Here's what I want you to understand. Your brain is incredibly good at making connections between visual information and text. When you see an image alongside text, your comprehension automatically improves. It's like having a built-in translator that helps explain what the words mean. Let me give you a personal example. When I was learning Italian, I loved reading cooking magazines. Even when I didn't understand all the vocabulary, the pictures helped me figure out what was happening. If I saw a photo of someone chopping onions next to text that included an unknown word, I could guess that word probably meant chop, or onions, or something related to cooking. But pictures aren't the only type of context that helps. Context includes everything around the words: the title of the article, the website it's on, the section of the newspaper, the time of year it was written, and especially the sentences before and after the difficult part. Here's a practical exercise you can try right now. Find an article with photos or illustrations. Read the title and look at the images first, before reading the text. Ask yourself, what do I think this article might be about? What words might I encounter? This prepares your brain for what's coming and makes comprehension much easier. Another context strategy. If you don't understand a sentence, read the sentences before and after it. Often, the surrounding text will give you clues about the meaning. It's like solving a puzzle. Each piece of information helps complete the picture. Remember, even native speakers use context clues all the time. We don't know every word in every article we read, but we use the context to understand the general meaning. You can do the same thing, and the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. Balali. Don't feel like you need to understand every single word to understand the meaning. Trust your brain's ability to fill in the gaps using context. Tip 4. Build reading speed gradually. Now let's talk about tip number 4. Build reading speed gradually. This is where patience really pays off. How fast do you read in English compared to your native language? I'm guessing it's much slower, right? That's completely normal. But here's what I see many students do. They get frustrated with their slow reading speed and try to force themselves to read faster immediately. This usually backfires because they end up understanding even less. Building reading speed is like training for a marathon. You don't start by running 26 miles on your first day. You start with shorter distances and gradually build up your endurance. Reading works exactly the same way. Here's my personal story. When I first started reading in Portuguese, I was so slow. I would read one page and feel exhausted. I was comparing my Portuguese reading speed to my English reading speed, which was completely unfair to myself. But I decided to practice just 15 minutes a day, and slowly, gradually, my speed improved. So how do you build reading speed without sacrificing comprehension? Start by reading materials that are slightly below your current level. When reading feels easy and comfortable, your eyes can move faster across the page. As you get more comfortable, gradually move to more challenging materials. Here's a specific exercise. Time yourself reading a short paragraph. Don't worry about speed at first. Just read for comprehension. Then read the same paragraph again, trying to go slightly faster while still understanding the main ideas. Repeat this a few times. You'll be surprised how much your speed improves, even in one session. Another technique. Practice reading word groups instead of individual words. Instead of reading, "The cat sat on the mat," try to see the cat and sat on the mat as chunks. This is how fluent readers process text, and it naturally increases speed. But here's the most important point. Never sacrifice understanding for speed. It's better to read slowly and comprehend than to read quickly and understand nothing. Speed will come naturally as your vocabulary grows and you become more comfortable with English sentence patterns. Set realistic goals. Maybe this week you'll read for 10 minutes a day. Next week, maybe 12 minutes. Small, consistent improvements are much better than trying to make huge changes all at once. Tip 5. Take effective notes while reading. We're halfway through our strategies. Let's talk about tip number 5, taking effective notes while reading. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Notes? That sounds like schoolwork. But hear me out. The right kind of note-taking can transform your reading experience. First, let me ask you this. How often do you finish reading something in English and then realize you can barely remember what it was about? This used to happen to me all the time when I was learning German. I'd spend 30 minutes reading an article, and the next day I couldn't even remember the main topic. That's because passive reading, just moving your eyes across the page, doesn't create strong memories. But when you take notes, you're actively engaging with the text, and this makes all the difference for retention and comprehension. Now, I'm not talking about writing down every single detail. That would be exhausting and counterproductive. I'm talking about smart, strategic note-taking that actually helps your brain process and remember information. Here's my simple note-taking system that works amazing for English learners. Before you start reading, write down 3 questions you hope the text will answer. As you read, jot down key words or phrases that seem important. After each paragraph or section, write 1 sentence summarizing what you just read. When you finish, write down 3 new things you learned. La folie. Let me share a personal example. When I was reading an article about climate change in Spanish, I wrote down, ¿Qué causa el cambio climático? What causes climate change? And ¿Qué podemos hacer? What can we do? Then as I read, I noted key terms like emisiones, emissions, and energía renovable, renewable energy. This kept me focused and helped me remember the content much better. But here's the key. Don't let note-taking slow you down too much or interrupt the flow of reading. If you stop to write detailed notes after every sentence, you'll lose the overall meaning. Find a balance that works for you. You can also try different note-taking methods, mind maps for connecting ideas, simple bullet points for listing key information, or even drawing quick sketches if you're a visual learner. The goal is to help your brain actively process what you're reading. And here's a bonus tip. Review your notes a day or 2 after reading. You'll be amazed at how much this simple review helps solidify your learning and vocabulary retention. Tip 6. Discuss what you read with others. Tip number 6 is one of my absolute favorites. Discuss what you read with others. This strategy is incredibly powerful, but it's often the most overlooked. Think about this. When you watch a great movie, what do you want to do afterward? You want to talk about it, right? You want to share your thoughts, hear other people's opinions, discuss the plot twists. Reading should be the same way. When you discuss what you've read, you're not just reviewing the content, you're using English in a natural, meaningful way. But I understand that this can feel intimidating. You might think, what if I misunderstood something? What if my English isn't good enough for a discussion? Let me tell you a story that might help. When I was learning French, I was terrified to discuss the books I was reading with native speakers. I was sure I'd misunderstood everything and would embarrass myself. But then I joined a small book club for French learners, and it was amazing. Everyone was in the same situation, and we helped each other understand difficult parts. Plus, explaining what I understood in my own words helped me remember the content so much better. Here's the beautiful thing about discussing reading. It doesn't have to be formal or academic. You can simply tell a friend, I read this interesting article about, or I was reading this story and I didn't understand why the character. These casual conversations are incredibly valuable for your English development. If you don't have English-speaking friends nearby, don't worry. There are so many online options. Join English reading groups on social media, participate in book discussion forums, find language exchange partners who want to practice English, or even record yourself summarizing what you read. That's like having a discussion with yourself. Here's a practical suggestion. After you finish reading something, try to explain it to someone else in just 2 or 3 sentences. This forces you to identify the most important information and practice expressing it clearly. If the person asks questions, even better. Answering questions about what you've read deepens your understanding. Akuli. The key is to make it social and interactive. Reading doesn't have to be a solitary activity. When you share your reading experiences with others, you're practicing speaking, listening, and critical thinking all at the same time. It's like getting 3 types of English practice for the price of 1. Tip 7. Reread difficult passages strategically. Let's talk about tip number 7. Rereading difficult passages strategically. Now, I want to challenge a common belief that many English learners have. How many of you think that rereading the same text is a waste of time? That you should always be reading new material to learn more? I used to think this way too. When I was learning Portuguese, I felt like I had to constantly find new articles and books. I thought rereading was somehow cheating or not productive. But then I discovered something amazing. Strategic rereading is actually one of the most effective ways to improve comprehension and build vocabulary. Here's why rereading works so well. The first time you read something challenging, your brain is working hard just to understand the basic meaning. But the second time, your brain can focus on nuances, notice sentence structures, and pick up vocabulary you missed the first time. It's like watching a movie twice. You always notice details you missed the first time. But I'm not talking about mindlessly reading the same paragraph over and over. I'm talking about strategic rereading with different purposes each time. Let me show you how this works. First reading. Focus only on getting the general idea. Don't stop for unknown words, don't worry about details. Just try to understand what the passage is about overall. Second reading. Now you can pay attention to vocabulary and specific details. Circle or highlight words you want to learn. Third reading. If needed, focus on sentence structure and grammar patterns. How does the author connect ideas? What verb tenses are used? Here's a personal example. I was reading a complex article about artificial intelligence in Spanish. The first time through, I was completely lost. But I pushed through just to get a general sense. The second time, I understood about 60% and could identify the key vocabulary. By the third reading, I felt confident about the main arguments and had learned several new technical terms. But here's the key. Don't reread everything. Only reread passages that are important to you or particularly challenging. If you're reading for pleasure and you don't understand one paragraph perfectly, that's okay. Keep moving. Rereading should be reserved for texts that you really want or need to understand deeply. Also, space out your rereadings. Don't read the same passage 3 times in a row. Read it once, come back to it the next day, then maybe again a few days later. This spaced repetition helps move information from short-term to long-term memory. Tip 8. Connect reading to speaking practice. Now, we're at tip number 8. Connect reading to speaking practice. This is where the magic really happens. Most people think of reading and speaking as completely separate skills, but they're actually deeply connected. Let me ask you this. When you read silently, what happens in your mind? Are you just seeing words, or are you actually hearing a voice reading to you? For most people, reading involves an internal voice. This means that reading actually practices your speaking patterns, your rhythm, and your pronunciation, even when you're silent. But we can make this connection even stronger with some specific techniques. Here's what I discovered when I was learning Italian. Reading out loud, even just for a few minutes, dramatically improved both my pronunciation and my comprehension. When you read aloud, you're forced to process the words more completely, and you start to internalize the natural rhythm of the language. Try this experiment. Read a paragraph silently, then read the same paragraph out loud. I guarantee you'll notice things in the second reading that you missed in the first. Your brain processes text differently when you engage your voice. Here are some specific ways to connect reading and speaking. Read dialogue from stories out loud with emotion and character voices. Record yourself reading short passages and listen back to check your pronunciation. Summarize what you've read by speaking aloud for 2 to 3 minutes, and practice explaining key concepts from your reading to an imaginary friend. I also love this technique. Find an interview transcript or dialogue and practice reading both parts. You can play both the interviewer and the interviewee. This helps you practice natural conversation patterns while improving your reading skills. But here's something really interesting. Reading can actually improve your speaking vocabulary. When you encounter new words in context while reading, you're more likely to use them correctly in speech later. The context helps you understand not just what the word means, but how it's actually used in natural communication. One of my students told me that after she started reading celebrity interviews and entertainment news, her casual English conversation improved dramatically. She was learning the kind of vocabulary and expressions that people actually use in everyday speech, not just formal academic language. So don't think of reading as just a silent, individual activity. Make it interactive, make it vocal. Your speaking and reading skills will improve together, and you'll develop a more natural feel for how English really works. Tip 9. Use online tools for grammar and vocabulary help. We're almost at the end. Let's talk about tip number 9, using online tools for grammar and vocabulary help. Now, I need to be honest with you about something. There's a right way and a wrong way to use online tools, and most people are doing it wrong. Let me tell you what usually happens. You're reading an article, you encounter a word you don't know, so you immediately stop and look it up in Google Translate or a dictionary. Then you encounter another unknown word, and you stop again, and again, and again. Before you know it, you've spent 30 minutes reading one paragraph because you stopped 15 times to look up words. This approach completely destroys your reading flow and comprehension. It's like trying to watch a movie where you pause every 30 seconds to ask questions. You lose the story, you lose the motivation, and you lose the enjoyment. But here's the smart way to use online tools. Finish reading first, then use tools strategically. When I was learning Korean, I developed this system. I would read an entire article or story chapter without stopping. I'd circle or underline words I didn't understand, but I wouldn't look them up immediately. Then, after finishing, I'd go back and research only the words that seemed important or that appeared multiple times. This approach has several advantages. You maintain reading flow and comprehension. You learn to use context clues, which is a crucial skill. You focus on truly important vocabulary rather than every single unknown word, and you save time and maintain motivation. Here are my favorite online tools and how to use them effectively. Google Translate for quick word meanings, but always check if the translation makes sense in context. Merriam-Webster or Cambridge Dictionary for detailed definitions and example sentences. Grammarly or similar tools for checking your writing about what you've read. YouTube for pronunciation help when you're not sure how to say a new word. But here's a pro tip. Create a vocabulary notebook, digital or physical, where you write down new words with the sentence where you found them. This context will help you remember and use the words correctly later. Don't just collect isolated word definitions. Also, use tools to verify your understanding, not to replace thinking. If you think a word means something based on context, look it up to confirm. This process of prediction and verification strengthens your learning much more than just looking up words immediately. Remember, tools should help your reading, not control it. You're the boss of your learning process. Tip 10. Make reading a consistent daily habit. And finally, tip number 10. Make reading a consistent daily habit. This is the foundation that makes all the other strategies work. Without consistency, even the best strategies won't help you improve. Let me ask you something personal. How many times have you started a fitness routine with huge enthusiasm, worked out intensely for a week, and then nothing? You stopped completely? We've all been there. Learning English is exactly the same. Consistency beats intensity every single time. When I was learning Mandarin, I made this mistake initially. I would have days where I'd read for 3 hours straight, feeling super motivated and proud of myself. But then I'd get busy or tired, and I wouldn't read anything in Chinese for a week. This on and off approach was much less effective than reading just 15 to 20 minutes every single day. Here's the science behind why daily habits work so well. Your brain learns through repetition and pattern recognition. When you read English regularly, your brain starts to recognize common sentence structures, vocabulary patterns, and grammar rules automatically. But when you read sporadically, your brain never gets the chance to build these automatic patterns. Fexwed. So how do you build a sustainable daily reading habit? Start ridiculously small. I'm talking about 10 to 15 minutes a day maximum. Choose a time that works consistently for you, maybe with morning coffee, during lunch break, or before bed. Pick reading materials you actually enjoy. If you love cooking, read cooking blogs. If you love sports, read sports news. Here's my personal habit. I read English news for 10 minutes every morning while drinking my coffee. It's become so automatic that I don't even think about it anymore. It's just part of my morning routine, like brushing my teeth. Track your progress in a simple way. You could use a calendar to mark off each day you read, or keep a reading journal with one sentence about what you read. Seeing your streak of consistent days is incredibly motivating. And here's the most important point. Progress happens gradually, then suddenly. You might not notice improvement day by day, but after a month of consistent reading, you'll be amazed at how much easier English texts have become. Trust the process. Conclusion. And there you have it. 10 reading strategies that will actually improve your English. Let me quickly recap these game-changing techniques for you. We talked about choosing the right level materials and understanding the difference between reading for gist versus detail. We covered using pictures and context for comprehension, building reading speed gradually, and taking effective notes while reading. We discussed the importance of discussing what you read with others, strategically rereading difficult passages, and connecting reading to speaking practice. Finally, we explored using online tools wisely and making reading a consistent daily habit. Remember, you don't need to implement all of these strategies at once. That would be overwhelming and counterproductive. Choose 2 to 3 strategies that resonated most with you, and focus on those first. Once they become natural, you can add more techniques to your reading toolkit. The most important message I want you to take away is this: reading in English should be enjoyable, not torture. If you're constantly struggling and frustrated, you need to adjust your approach. Choose easier materials, use more context clues, or change your reading goals. I hope these strategies help you fall in love with reading in English. When reading becomes a pleasure rather than a chore, your English improvement will accelerate dramatically. If you found this episode helpful, please hit that like button and share it with your friends who are also learning English. Your support really helps me create more content like this. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which reading strategy are you going to try first? What kind of materials do you enjoy reading most? Do you have any reading challenges you'd like me to address in future episodes? Don't forget to subscribe to Easy English with Erica for more practical English learning tips. I'm here to support you on your English journey, and I'm so proud of the progress you're making. Keep reading, keep learning, and remember, every page you read in English is making you stronger. I'll see you in the next episode.